Hi, and welcome to Conversations with B'nai B'rith. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. Today, we're exploring the power of memory, how we preserve the stories of Jewish refugees and Holocaust survivors so that they're never forgotten. My guest, Dr. Sylvia Asmus, leads this effort as director of the German Exile Archive, 1933 to 1945, at the German National Library in Frankfurt, ensuring that voices of exile remain part of our shared history. Before we get into today's conversation, a quick reminder: if you enjoy this program, subscribe to Conversations with B'nai B'rith wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a rating. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook to stay updated with all of our latest content. The German Exile Archive at the German National Library in Frankfurt preserves the personal histories of individuals who fled Nazi persecution. It houses letters, photographs, books, and testimonies that vividly capture the realities of displacement, survival, and resilience. Through exhibitions, research, and digital initiatives, the archive ensures that these voices are not lost to time, especially as the number of Holocaust survivors continues to dwindle. Its permanent exhibition, which I was privileged to see in Frankfurt, Exile, Experience, and Testimony, presents these stories from multiple perspectives, offering deeper insights into the impact of forced migration. Leading the Exile Archive is Dr. Sylvia Asmus, a scholar whose work has helped shape how we study and preserve exile history. Since 2011, she has led the archive, curating exhibitions and expanding access to its collections. With a background in German literature, art history, and library science, she's published extensively on exile studies and the preservation of historical memory. And under her leadership, the archives continues to deepen our understanding of forced migration and ensure that the experiences of those who fled Nazi persecution remain a vital part of our historical record, making a profound contribution to a living culture of remembrance. Dr. Asmus, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first, could you tell us about the German National Library and the Exile Archive? How did it begin? What is its mission, and how has it evolved over time?
The German Exile Archive is part of the German National Library, which represents the unification of two institutions. The Deutsche Bücherei, which was founded already in 1912 in Leipzig, in the eastern part of Germany, and the Deutsche Bibliothek, founded in 1946 in Frankfurt, in the western part of Germany. And in 1990, after the reunification of Germany, these institutions came together to build the German National Library as we know it today. And this German National Library acts as like the nation's memory, collecting a wide range of media published in Germany, related to Germany, or written in German. And with over 49 million items, it is a central institution for preserving cultural heritage. Now, the German Exile Archive was founded in 1949 in Frankfurt, and it has a fascinating history that remains relevant today. It was exiled journalists and publicists who had fled Hitler and found refuge in Switzerland after 1933, who initiated the Exile Archive in close cooperation with the then director of the German National Library, Hans-Wilhelm Eppelsheimer. And of course, this was no easy task for authors and journalists who had escaped persecution after 1933, often in danger, stripped of their rights, and many tragically having lost family members during the Holocaust. So collaborating with the German institution in the early post-war years was a difficult decision, and the exiled authors debated whether it was the right course of action, but in the end, they choose to move forward. And this marks the beginning of the Exile Archive, which remains dedicated to honoring those who fled Hitler after 1933.
Now, your academic background in German literature, art history, and library science is extensive. What led to your current role as the director of the Exile Archive?
Thank you. I studied German literature with the initial goal of working in a publishing house. And after graduating from university, I discovered the German National Library, and I began working here, initially thinking it would be a short-term position to gain insight into such an institution. However, when I had the chance to work in the Exile Archive, I immediately felt a deep sense of purpose, a feeling that has stayed with me ever since. And inspired by this experience, I pursued a second degree in library science and later earned my PhD. And in 2011, I was appointed director of the archive. And this is a role that allows me to continue doing work that really matters to me.
So the archival acquisition process is something that's often overlooked, but archives depend on acquiring materials. How does the archive acquire those materials? Do most come from family donations, or are they offered by institutions and other organizations? What methods does the archive use to ensure that these valuable materials align with the mission of the archive?
In the early days, it was often the exiles themselves who would bring us the documents to ensure they were preserved and made accessible for researchers. And today, it's often their grandchildren reaching out to us. We've maintained relationships with many families really for decades. And the transfer of materials is often like a gradual process built on trust, of course, and a shared commitment to preserving history. We also participate in auctions and we acquire materials from antiquarian book dealers. And for publication, we also collect exile publications. We follow clear guidelines. Simply put, if a work was published in exile after the Nazis came to power, and involved someone who fled, it falls within our collection scope. And I'm not just talking about authors here. We are interested in works where exiles were editors, illustrators, publishers, or even designed the book cover. And now don't think it's all novels and poetry. We are also after scientific papers, political writings, popular fiction, even children books. And our aim is to capture the full spectrum of what exiles produced. So far, we gathered around 33,000 books and 34,000 periodical issues. And then, of course, there's our collection of archival material. You already mentioned it, which is also broad in scope. And we collect archives of exile institutions, such as the Exile Pen and the Emergency Rescue Committee, but equally important are personal papers we've collected from individuals from all walks of life, including authors, artists, and scientists. And we are not just interested, and this is important, in the exile experience of well-known figures. We also value the stories of lesser known or even unknown people who had to leave Germany after 1933.
Yeah, I want to ask you about some of the more well-known figures, but just to go back to the acquisition of materials, I mean, these were people who were in flight. They, more likely than not, they kind of left a lot of things behind. They had their suitcase and were gone. What about photographs? Do you have a substantial number of photographs as well, in addition to some of the other things that you mentioned?
Yes, we do have. We do have very interesting collections of photographs. We have the papers of some photographers. So there is a vast amount of photographs in their collection, but also most of the people who were forced to flee took some photographs with them, family photographs or photographs from landscapes or from cities where they used to live. And of course, this is really important material to us.
So who are some of the well-known Jewish figures whose materials are part of the collection? Are there also individuals from other backgrounds and religions whose stories help to contextualize the broader experience of being in exile?
Yeah, they're both. To highlight a few examples, we hold handwritten letters, for example, by Albert Einstein, reflecting on Germany, as well as deeply personal correspondence from the renowned Austrian writer Stefan Zweig. And these are really touching. In the 1941 letter from Brazil, Zweig describes feeling rootless, and he writes, not only plants and teeth need roots, but people do too. And we also hold famous Joseph Roth's handwritten manuscript from a novel. It's called Confession of a Murderer Told in One Night. And the novel narrates the story of a man who believes he has committed murder, only to discover he has not. And this is a really rare item. Another highlight from the collection is a series of letters from the author's Franz Werfel to his parents, written before and after his escape across the Pyrenees. And we are also very proud to house the complete literary estate of author Leo Perwutz, one of Austria's most celebrated authors before he was forced to flee and find refuge in Israel. Most of the documents in the Exile Archive reflect the experience of Jewish exiles, but we also hold collections from non-Jewish individuals who were persecuted for their political beliefs or for helping others. For example, there's the estate of politician Hermann Görgen, who helped 48 people to emigrate to Brazil, or the collection of the publicist and politician Hubertus Prinz zu Löwenstein, who founded the aid organization American Guild for German Cultural Freedom.
Now, much of the archive's work focuses on preserving memory through various mediums, documents, as you said, exhibits, and digital platforms. As the number of Shoah survivors dwindles and the Holocaust fades from living memory, how do you see the role of digital technology evolving in preserving and presenting Jewish exile histories? What challenges and opportunities does this present for future generations?
Digitization is crucial for our work in several ways. We are making parts of our collection available online, considering copyright and funding limitations, of course. For instance, the papers of Leo Perwutz are fully accessible online, and this is really important for research. We've digitized about 30,000 books and many exile periodicals. But we are also using innovative ways to connect students with Holocaust history. In partnership with the Shoah Foundation, we've created interactive digital interviews with survivors Kurt Salomon Meyer, who was deported to Camp Gurs, and Inge Auerbacher, who survived Theresienstadt, and both later emigrated to the United States. And they each answered 900 questions, allowing users to engage directly with their digital testimonies, an approach students find especially meaningful. And for these interactive interviews, we use AI to facilitate engagement, but we don't employ generative AI. Our focus is on preserving authentic survivor testimony, and this approach ensures that the survivors' voices remain genuine, while we utilize technology to improve accessibility and enhance user interaction with these important historical accounts.
Now, the Exile Archive preserves the histories of those forced to flee Germany between 1933 and 1945, with a particular focus on Jewish refugees. But before we go any further, can you perhaps speak to some of the fundamental questions that the archive, a platform in its own right, poses? In other words, what does it mean, for example, to have to go into exile? What awaits one there? Does exile ever finish? Are you always in exile? So these are questions I'm sure that over the years, as you've assembled all of these documents and all of these materials, and you, of course, people like Einstein we know about, but there are many others that are less well known. But there is a picture that is being painted here when one looks at this material. So tell us about what exile means.
Mm-hmm. This is an important and difficult question to answer. So I would say exile is a deeply personal experience that really can't be generalized. But we hope to help our visitors understand that no two exile stories are alike. However, we can say for most people, exile means leaving crucial parts of their lives behind, often friends and families, their mother tongue, cultural familiarity, profession, success, and like a sense of belonging. And many who choose exile have already faced persecution, disenfranchisement, and often violence. And they often arrived in their host country already feeling uprooted, making it challenging to start anew. And the experience in a new country depends on various factors. So is the society open-minded? Is the culture familiar or easy to adapt to? Are economic challenges making the country less welcoming to newcomers? And many more factors. And to address the question, does exile ever truly end? In many cases, the answer is no. This doesn't mean feeling uprooted forever, but the connection to one's original home often persists, whether through good or painful memories. And what remains of exile, I would say it's the contributions exiles bring to the host countries, to their work, art, culture, as well, of course, the gaps they leave in their homelands. And sometimes there is something, how can I say, entirely new that blends origin and refuge. But of course, being forced into exile also can create a profound sense of insecurity. And this experience often leads to a lasting awareness of life's fragility. And the last thing that remains are the physical traces of exile, documents, photographs, like you mentioned before, artworks, manuscripts. And these are the items we preserve in the Exile Archive to keep these stories alive.
Well, the archive has an impressive online presence, and its exhibitions tell powerful personal stories. I saw that in the permanent exhibition that you have up. How do you select the themes and individuals featured in these exhibits? Are there any also any new exhibitions that are currently in development? And do you travel these exhibitions to other places?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes we do that. Sometimes we travel with our exhibitions to other places. We traveled a lot in the United States, for example, with an exhibition, Exile Experience and Testimony. There are various factors that inspire our exhibitions. Sometimes it's an anniversary or a newly acquired collection that prompts us to create a display. And increasingly emerging technologies like AI also spark ideas for innovative presentations of our archive materials, like the interactive interviews. Currently on display is the exhibition Just Ask, featuring the life stories of Holocaust survivors Inge Auerbacher and Kurt Salomon Meyer. And the exhibition begins in a small southern village in Germany with a vibrant Jewish community and a synagogue, recounting how the life of Inge and Kurt changed in 1933. And the exhibition details their deportation to Großen Theresienstadt and their beginnings, their new lives in the United States. The exhibition explores how individuals cope with such a traumatic past. And at the heart of this exhibition are the two digital interactive interviews. I told you about this before. And this innovative project was inspired by advancements in AI technology, and it was inspired by my friendship with Kurt Salomon Meyer, because we know each other more than 16 years now. And our next exhibition will feature the photographer Fred Stein, who emigrated to the United States via France, and he created very impressive photographs. We will showcase his photographs depicting exiled authors and their concepts for a new Germany.
Now, the permanent exhibition at the Exile Archive is structured around three main phases of exile: Exodus, in exile, and after exile. Could you elaborate on why this structure was chosen and how it helps to tell the story of exile?
Our permanent exhibition is divided into those three chapters, reflecting the main phases of exile: fleeing, life in exile, and the aftermath of 1945. And the first chapter, Flight, looks at why people fled and what forced them to leave everything behind. Many left after crucial events like the Nazis coming to power in 1933, the Nuremberg laws, of course, in 1935, and the November pogroms in 1938. And this section also illustrates various escape routes and destination countries, shedding light on the numerous challenges exiles encountered. The chapter also highlights those who helped by offering money, escape networks, or forged documents. And the second main chapter, In Exile, addresses everyday life in exile. So communication across vast distances, profession, language, culture, and resistance in exile. And these are really important topics that shaped the lives of those who had to find refuge. And we have to understand this to understand what exile means. The final chapter looks at what happened after 1945, who returned to Germany, who stayed, and it explores how Germany received those who came back and how people dealt with the trauma of the Holocaust.
Well, we've talked about the different collections, the ones that you feel really stand out. How do you think these collections help illustrate the personal and the collective experiences of those who have been exiled? Because in the case of some, you may have some documents, you may have some things that they wrote. In the case of others, you may have photographs, but you may not have necessarily other kinds of documents. So do you think that these collections, as we say at the end of the day, can really draw an accurate picture of the individual who fled?
Perhaps not an accurate picture, because you really can't generalize exile. But I think, really you can have a picture of exile. And it is really important to have this different collection from very famous people, well-known people, and totally unknown people, because exile meant totally different things to them. So I think it is really important to have for example, collections from authors, artists, but also from unknown people to understand what exile meant. And of course, many letters are really interesting and shed light on what people got to know in their host countries. And of course, it's really differs where they went to, if they found refuge in the United States or in South America or even in Shanghai.
So what are some of the personal stories from the collection that have resonated the most with visitors or researchers when they come to see the archive? What are they most impressed with? What jumps out at them as they begin to look through the stories and the items from the collections that you have?
That's hard to choose. An important figure in our collection is Rudolf Olden. I fear he's forgotten today, but he was a very famous journalist and lawyer who advocated for freedom of speech and human rights before 1933. And after fleeing Nazi Germany, he co-founded the German Pen Club in exile. where he supported fellow exiled writers. And during the Second World War, Olden was interned in Britain. And after his release, he tried to reach the United States. And tragically, in 1940, he and his wife lost their lives when their ship was torpedoed by a German submarine. And his legacy highlights the importance of standing up for human rights, and really shows the impact one individual can have in the struggle for justice. And we featured Rudolf Olden in an exhibition that was very well received by our visitors. And just a few months ago, we held another event with over 350 participants discussing what Rudolf Olden might say today. And additionally, a new book titled The Olden Brothers has recently been published. So I think clearly Rudolf Olden continues to capture the interest of people today, and it's really of great interest what he wrote and said. And I would like to share another example, if I may. Our collection includes the manuscript of the novel The Passenger by Ulrich Alexander Boschwitz. Yes. And this novel was written in 1938, and it follows Otto Silbermann, a Jewish businessman who becomes a hunted man after the Nazis rise to power in 1933. And he desperately travels across Germany by train, trying to cross the border. And Boschwitz's own life mirrors this story. He was born in Berlin in 1915, and he fled Nazi Germany, living in Sweden and England before being interned as an enemy alien, and he was deported to Australia. And tragically, he died in 1942 when his ship also was torpedoed. And rediscovered decades later, the novel was published in German in 2018, just some years ago, and has since been translated into many, many languages. And it is really a really great success. And in our permanent exhibition, visitors can sit in like a train cabin and immerse themselves in an audiovisual installation inspired by this novel. And this installation really is really well received.
I'm so pleased to hear that. I did read The Passenger after it was translated into English. It is a thoroughly absorbing book. Yeah. And the reader really does enter into the railroad car, enters into the life of this fellow who just can't find peace, and he can't find a place to go. And it's really I think a book that should be much more widely read. And of course, now that it's in translation, hopefully more will do that. But I'm very pleased to hear that you have had a role in reviving the memory of Boschwitz and his work.
I'm pleased to hear that you read it. Yeah, great.
Well, I want to ask you about oral histories too, because they provide invaluable firsthand accounts. How many do you have? You have a lot of firsthand oral histories. Do they focus solely on those who fled from 1933 to 45, or do they include later experiences as well? And how do these accounts contribute to the broader understanding of exile?
I can't really give you a number, but we do have a lot of oral history. Our collection, of course, focuses on German-speaking exiles from 1933 to 1945. Feature oral histories from individuals who fled during that period, but additionally, we highlight contemporary exiles in Germany, such as Chinese author Liao Yiwu, Turkish journalist Can Dündar, for example, or the Belarusian writer Volya Hapeyeva. All have found freedom of expression in our country. And by connecting the experience of the past and present exiles, while not equating them, we emphasize the lasting significance of free speech, democracy, and Germany's constitution, the Grundgesetz, because that's really important to those I mentioned.
Many of the archive's materials focus on children. And how does the collection document and present their experiences?
Our collection includes many papers telling the stories of children in exile. Some of them managed to escape with their families, like the later author Stefanie Zweig, who emigrated with her parents to Kenya. However, in many cases, children had to part with their parents and were sent abroad on Kindertransports to different countries. And these are really sad stories. I would like to highlight our collection on Lily First, a 30-year-old Jewish girl from Frankfurt who was sent to Sweden on a Kindertransport in 1939, I guess, separated from her parents who were later murdered during the Holocaust. And Lily's story was featured in our exhibition Child Emigration from Frankfurt. And the exhibition presented 6 biographies of child emigrants, including Lily's and that of Dr. Ruth Westheimer. And working with famous Dr. Ruth was one of the most memorable experiences for me. She visited me to visit her in New York, and she contributed to the exhibition, shared her really moving story at a special event, and it was truly an honor to collaborate with such an inspiring person. And the exhibition was very well received by our visitors, and it added, and this is really important, an important perspective to our town's history, because all those children were sent abroad from the Frankfurt main station.
Well, film historians often discuss the impact of refugee performers, writers, directors on American cinema in the late 1920s, right through the 1950s. Are there plans to explore and spotlight their lives before emigration, perhaps through a symposium or an exhibition, or maybe even a documentary?
Unfortunately not at the moment, but this is a really important topic. And we do have a fascinating archive on film exile. A few years ago, we acquired the archive of Günther Peter Straschek, who dedicated his whole life to this topic. His collection includes, 3,500 files on filmmakers, actors, cameramen in exile, and many of whom emigrated to the United States. And because the topic is of such great importance also for research, we prioritized the archive for cataloging. And my colleague went through all those files to generate the metadata, enabling researchers to work with the materials. And they are really working on it.
We have time for a couple more questions, and I want to get this one in for sure. You built a strong relationship with the B'nai B'rith Schoenstatt Lodge in Frankfurt and have greatly supported its publishing efforts, deeply appreciative. How did that partnership begin? And beyond research and assisting researchers, were you also involved in curating the exhibit about Frankfurt, Mannheim, and Nuremberg lodges, which I was also privileged to see when I was in Frankfurt some months ago?
The partnership with the Schoenstatt Lodge began through its dedicated president, Ralf Hoffmann, whose commitment to preserving Jewish history is really inspiring. And the Schoenstatt Lodge and the Exile Archive share a mission, so to say, remembering Jewish culture, including those who fled Germany after 1933 and those who were murdered during the Holocaust. And B'nai B'rith lodges provided belonging and a purpose for refugees. And this connection is also reflected in our archive holdings. Just a few years ago, we acquired the archive of the Bialik Lodge, founded in 1936 or 7 in Israel. And the archive is incomplete, but the remaining 200 files offer crucial insights into the lodge's function in exile. They were really important for the community and for identity building for those who had experienced disenfranchisement and violence. So this is a connection. And although I wasn't really involved in curating the exhibition or writing the publication, I immediately agreed to collaborate. Then Ralf Hoffmann asked me to inaugurate the exhibition here at the German National Library, because sharing this story is so important to understand the lodge's importance not only for Jewish individuals, but for Frankfurt's broader community, because they did a lot for the city. And the inauguration of the exhibition was really a great success, with many attendees celebrating this chapter of history, of Frankfurt history.
Well, we appreciate your involvement in this, and of course, Ralph's taking the lead and the initiative in so many of these important projects. The lodge itself is one of the oldest in all of B'nai B'rith, and it really is quite encouraging to see that it takes a strong interest in its past and its present, and hopefully, of course, in its future as well. One more question. I just want to go back to visual artists. We talked about painters and photographers, sculptors, perhaps. An essential part of the archive. Paintings are all over the world, and you mentioned, you always keep an eye out for interesting material. How do you track all of this in your efforts to acquire new material?
So we have several antiquarian book dealers working with us in several countries, and of course they are telling us there is an interesting collection showing up, and we also are on bidding on auctions, and we have several auction catalogs. But most of the items really comes from families, also in the cases of art collections. And now it's the third generation reaching out for us and telling us, I have an interesting collection from my grandfather here, who took photographs, for example, during their authors' gathering in Paris, or who took photographs in New York. And so that's the way the archives are finding their way to our collection.
Yeah, it's a global outreach. It has to be, because
it has to be.
Lived all over the world. Wow.
Yeah, it is.
Well, the German Exile Archive, 1933-1945, is a permanent exhibition at the German National Library in Frankfurt, Germany, curated by Dr. Sylvia Asmus. You can learn more at dns.de. Dr. Asmus, thank you for your expertise and for your preserving the stories of those exiled during the Nazi era. I listened to all of this, and you have saved the stories of so many people, some names that we know and many that we don't know. And it's very encouraging also to know that their memory lives on. That's what Holocaust remembrance is about. There are many parts to Holocaust remembrance, and this is an extremely important one. And your dedication helps these testimonies to perpetuate and, of course, are never forgotten. And we wish you continued success in your efforts.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me and for your interest.
Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of Conversations with B'nai B'rith. A heartfelt thank you to Dr. Sylvia Asmus for sharing her insights on the vital work of the German Exile Archive and its crucial role in preserving the stories of Jewish refugees, safeguarding Holocaust memory, and ensuring that the lessons of exile remain part of our collective consciousness. And of course, thanks to you, our viewers, for tuning in. Remember, the conversation doesn't end there. Share this episode with others. Post about it on social media. Leave us a comment or a rating. And to stay updated, follow or subscribe to Conversations with B'nai B'rith wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook for more great content. We'll be back soon with more important discussions on Jewish history, culture, and issues that matter most to our community and beyond. But until then, this is your host, Dan Mariaschin, on behalf of my guest, Dr. Sylvia Asmus, and myself. Take care, everyone.